Hello, I'm the Autism Dad, Victor Antunez, the Inclusive Miami Realtor. Today we're talking special needs financial planning with financial planners Steve and Clark and Nelson Maldonado. They've also got kids on the spectrum, so they got skin in the game. Steve, let's go start with you. Tell me a little bit about your background.
All right. Well, I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. Lived there until the mid-90s when I moved overseas to pursue a career in high finance. And during that time, spent time in Europe, down in Brazil. But in 2016, my life changed. And that was with the birth of my twins. They were born premature at 26 weeks. We spent 4.5 months in the intensive care. My wife was in intensive care for the first month of that as well. And one of my sons picked up a brain infection at birth. And they were able to cure it fairly quickly, but it led to some damage. That led to hydrocephalus and developmental delays. So we spent a couple of years in Brazil trying to get his therapies, figure out how he was going to develop. And then we decided to move back to the US. Moved to Miami in 2021. Kind of not really mid-COVID, but getting towards the end. And it was difficult to set up everything, life in the US when I'd been gone for 20 years. So had to look at schools, getting diagnosis, getting a new diagnosis for my son, getting everything for my other two children as well. And we were able to fight through that whole process. It took months, but we got set up. We started off my son in the public schools, then eventually found he needed more help though than he could get there at the time during COVID. And we ended up getting to finding a school and therapy center called Carpe Diem. And that was a godsend. So he's been going there for the past couple of years and really has been, we've settled into life in Miami and he's got a great program.
And why did you choose Miami?
So my wife is Brazilian. We were living in Brazil and it was just a good place that was in between where my family is up in DC and where her family is. And we really liked the culture here. And we didn't know at the time the amazing special needs infrastructure that was here. So that was not a plan, but it ended up being an absolute godsend once we got here.
Now, what's interesting about your boys, your twin boys, is that one's on the spectrum and one is not. How's that dynamic worked out for you?
Exactly. Well, it's interesting because when you have premature children, they're always behind on their milestones, but they catch up. And so we didn't know how Luke would develop. Luke is the one on the spectrum. And so we would see Thomas start to talk, but Luke was behind. Thomas start to crawl, to walk. And Luke would always get there, but he would get there behind later, everything except talking. And so it was kind of interesting to have a benchmark to see, okay, this is, we didn't even realize that Luke was delayed really until his first day of school. And then we could see how Thomas interacted and how Luke interacted. So it's been it was helpful to see what was due to say the disability and what was due to just the genetics.
Okay. And Nelson, you've got boys on the spectrum as well?
Yes. So we have a similar story in terms of our international background. We started to see issues in 2020 when my youngest, Nelson, turned 18 months and he started to regress a little bit on his language and other skills. And they were also born in Sweden, as my wife is from Sweden, and it was quite a challenge because it was Corona time, and also there was no flights, and their first language was, spoken to in Swedish, and it was hard for us to see, especially because in Sweden, as most people think, it has a very good health system. It really doesn't have a lot of coverage for autistic.
Okay.
Which wasn't a problem back then because we didn't know then, but we found out a year and a half later after he was born, and started to research and understand how good it was here in Florida. So we decided to take the kids here, and in the midst of that, we had our second child, which also was under the spectrum. And it's been a challenging 3 to 4 years of fighting in the midst of understanding and finding the right solution for our kids. We're still there. It's still a long process, and thankfully we have joined forces, and we have found a good network that helps us understand what the next steps are, and we can also add our sand, our grain of sand to the ocean here, and help other families figure out this very difficult path that is upon them.
Now, you guys both use the word fight, and I hear that word a lot amongst autism, especially these parents, which I think is really a shame, but it is what it is. Like, what does that fight look like for you, Nelson?
Well, it starts with inclusion. It starts with understanding the path that we need to go through. One of the things that helped me a lot understand my path was, I read in a magazine that, there's different ways of treating and seeing autism. One of the beautiful concepts that really helped me move forward was, a lot of people don't see it as a disease or a condition. They see it as a hyper-focused mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a different operating system. You have Windows, Linux, and you have autism.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge for us is to find what is that they can be obsessed about, but that society also likes. And if we can find that matching concept, we can create a genius in a way. I mean,
in their own path.
In their own path. I'm saying not a genius for the world, a genius in terms of them being happy, of them having a purpose and being accepted. So to me, the path or the problem is finding that common denominator that will help him be included in society, but also have enough to defend himself economically and in other aspects that, matter for us as parents.
Are they in an autism school like Steve's kids or a regular school?
So they both do one-on-one 8 hours a day on ABA therapy. But my oldest one is going to public school, and he has the BCBA shadow him. My youngest one is nonverbal, so he has pure therapy. And we're looking to put him into school next year to try out the combination, as that did help a lot Nelson, my oldest one. So
okay. And Steve, what does that fight look like for you?
So the fight started a little bit different, which was a fight for survival, to teach him how to eat, how to walk, how to protect himself. And, when he started walking, he would fall down a lot. If he sees steps, he can't go up and down steps. So he's 8 years old now. So we had to teach him how to basically be safe in life in general, just with basic physical things. And then the fights for understanding what school program was correct for him, because he doesn't fit into a lot of the buckets that are there. He has several disabilities. At one point, the diagnosis was global developmental delays, which is when you have more than 2 developmental delays. Mm-hmm. So trying to find what was the right program for him was really part of the problem. And then once we found that, though, then it became, the path became much smoother.
Okay.
And one thing, I would say in terms of people's interaction with him is that people in general are good.
Decent.
And it's been great to see that. Yeah, people are decent. They accept him. They don't get, every once in a while, you run into someone that might get annoyed, but in general, people are very, very accepting.
That's very nice. Nelson, I'm going to ask you one more question.
Absolutely.
And then we'll go into finances because this is like the finance podcast.
Yes.
You mentioned the regression with your child.
Yes.
Now, my daughter had her regression at about 2.5 years. And because she was our first child, my wife and I, we just thought it was normal, right? Because it's like, oh, how cute, right? Because it's all cute at that age. But we weren't in denial. We just didn't know we didn't know. So when your child had the regression, did you know it was autism or did somebody tell you it was autism?
Well, I have a unique case because my sister, she's a pediatrician, and my wife's a nurse. And so them being very involved in the medical field, they could see something a lot more in advance than I did. I was in true denial for over a year. I just couldn't fathom the fact that, this was happening. And when it happened again, I was like, where are the statistics on this? Like, the odds should be in my favor. But in reality, it's become a challenge that became the foundation of a great purpose for ourselves. So everything that I wanted in my life has changed, and it's become a more meaningful purpose. So, where you see problems, you can also see solutions. And, we say in Spanish, no te preocupes, ocúpate. Don't preoccupy yourself with the problems, occupy yourself with the solutions. So that's something that we need to help other parents understand that, it is normal to be in denial for the beginning of it, but at one point you have to occupy yourself with the solutions and get past it. So that's...
I'll say the same thing happened to me. Before my daughter was diagnosed with autism, it was all about me or my family. But once you have an autistic kid and you're exposed to a lot of other people on the same journey, now it becomes about the community.
Absolutely.
And it's made me a better person. My boy, who's on the spectrum, his older sister made him better because he's already big brothering his little sisters, which is awesome to see that.
Absolutely.
And it's changed the whole family dynamic. Everybody in my family is on board. Nobody's in denial. Nobody like holds it against us. So I'm blessed in that sense. And it just has opened up like my eyes to just be more community minded, like you said.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk now about financial planning for special needs. You have a bit of a disclaimer. Let's go through that, and then we'll talk some more.
So basically, we cannot offer any fiscal or legal advice. However, we do work very close to CPAs and estate lawyers and other asset lawyers that will help get what we need in place. What we should be looked at as a quarterback. We will help you figure out what keeps you up at night. What are the solutions that need to be implemented, and which professionals do we need to align ourselves with in order to get that plan going?
Now, when I hear fiscal, I think automatically money, everything money related. But you're talking about more like tax planning, right?
Yes, it's tax planning, and it's also legal planning that kind of goes along with our planning, but we cannot write the document because we're not lawyers and we're not a CPA to really
You just point the direction to go in.
We have experience having families in our book of business and also in our own experience to help us understand and navigate these problems or that we can't talk about, but the guidance is there. It's just that we cannot incur into their field and they can come into ours. So the only advantage that has talking to somebody like us is that we really try to incorporate other planners into our planning versus other planners are going to normally start with their plan, and then when it's done, you continue to the other advisor. So we want to do it all at the same time because it does have a huge impact in the future of the planning. So
now, Steve, when I hear financial planning, I just assume wealthy people, but you've told me that no, it's people on the whole spectrum of economics. So how does that, if you're of lower middle class or even below, would this still be a good fit for them?
Yes, absolutely. So I was telling you before, we have some clients, we go out and we do this presentation and
I was at your presentation in Key Biscayne. Yes,
exactly. And I just want to take one quick step back, if that's okay, and just say that when we go out in the community, what are we talking about? We are really trying to show that now parents and caregivers do a great job of children and loved ones with special needs, do a tremendous job caring for them every day. One of their biggest fears is what happens when they're no longer around.
I think
Be
it's
able to
the
give that
biggest
care.
fear, actually.
The biggest fear. And that's where we come in, and we help them to manage their resources and create a sustainable plan for that time in the future when they're no longer there.
Now, if I come to you, my daughter's 8 years old, what would be a plan you would set up for me?
So the first thing we would do is, look at the specific situation and, okay, where, like right now, I believe she's in Peru, right?
Yes.
So are you going to move is your plan to move to the U.S.?
Yes, it is.
Good. Okay. So there's a technical part of the presentation, which is really coordinating government benefits like Medicaid and SSI with tools like special needs trusts and ABLE accounts. And the whole goal is to make sure that you maintain eligibility for these government programs while still providing resources for your child in the future. And so that's one part of the plan. But it's not just about the money. It's also about who's going to be the successor caregivers. What's that going to look like? Who's going to be if you do set up a special needs trust, who's going to be the successor trustees? Who's going to manage the money? Who's going to take care of the child? And make sure that all of those plans are set up, and even go down a couple of levels, like who's going to be the second successor trustee, who's going to be the third successor caregiver. And it's thinking about all these issues, getting them documented, also creating then there's so you get those documents all done, and then you go, okay, I know exactly what's going to happen to my child when if and when the day comes that I'm no longer here. But there's also a item called I don't want to get too much into details, but called a letter of intent, which is, you can think about that as you as a parent are writing to who's going to be taking care of your child in the future, everything about them. So their medical information, but also things they like to do, what they like to eat, the clothes they like to wear. And then you get all these documents, and then that doesn't get filed anywhere. That's not a legal document. That's something we help you write. We have a caregiver's toolkit that helps you kind of think about all the different items that should go in there. And you just keep that with your documents. So you have your financial plan, you have your trusts, you know where all your money's going to go once you pass away, and you have kind of the guide for your child here.
I gotta admit, I'm just a little bit like, how do we frame
That's a lot
this?
to unpack.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. How do we frame this? So let's say you got like lower income, middle income, higher income. Unpack that for me, Nelson.
Okay, so obviously it's easier to make a plan for somebody who has a lot of resources available to them. But the great thing we were talking before was how this specific state has so much resources to incorporate. So there are things that we can't get really into, but in general, depending on the demographics of economics that the person has, we will take a different path to get to a common path, which is guarantee a legacy, guarantee a support system, guarantee that these systems you put into place actually work. Typical error that you'll find in most families is they want to put a sibling of the kid with special needs as the guardian or as the heir. These are things that normally end up in disaster because the siblings are not equipped to do that type of work into the future, or the sibling gets married and ends up putting their estate with their new wife's estate, and that wasn't really meant for them.
Maybe it's a divorce. And
exactly.
Things go south.
There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and what we have is that experience with working with other families and our own experience to help them not fall into these pitfalls that are typical in special need planning.
Now, I'll play devil's advocate.
Yes.
For people that don't know. Now, let's say that you, I have a trust for my daughter, and I appoint a non-family guardian. How do I know that person will do what's in the best interest of my daughter over her lifetime?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about. Us being Latin, we have very little belief in the financial institutions, right? Because in our country, we have high inflation, politic problems, economic problems. So especially us Latin, we don't really rely on financial institutions because we're scared that they might not be there tomorrow. But we have to shift our mind, and that's one of the bullet points that I touched in our presentation. Is we need to start thinking the Anglo-Saxon way in that specific matter, which is the trust title. Trust is when you remove, and I'm not giving a legal definition, I'm just giving you a general conception of what it does. And it removes the ownership or the control that you have of certain assets, and you entrust it to somebody else, which is called a trustee.
Is that like a company or a person?
It could be a person, it could be a company, it could be a
and there's
friend.
companies that do just that.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, for a price, obviously. Or you can have a family friend that, knows finance or knows some law or knows fiscal systems, and you can have them in place if you trust them. But you should always have a backup, right? Somebody you trust, and then what happens if that person is not there? It ends up always being a non-related company, because that you can trust a little bit more into the future, because that's what they do.
And
right?
There's government oversight of these.
And there's government oversight, yeah, absolutely. But nonetheless, there is a risk factor that happens on both sides of the spectrum. And the idea here is giving yourself the chance to do the best you can to have the peace of mind, knowing that that's there. Okay. So
now, Steve, there's the financial planning for when we're gone, but there's also the planning for when we're here. Now, you had spoken about your boy doing equine therapy or horse therapy, and that's got to be very expensive. Yeah. How did you get that funded?
That was fortunate. So that was through the school, and they were
Carpe Diem.
Carpe Diem. Okay. Yeah, Carpe Diem Academy. The name of the horse center therapy is Whispering Manes in Kendall, and they offered 10 free lessons to selected students from Carpe Diem. Basically, the first 10 to reply.
Okay. Now, if they hadn't been free, how would a parent or parents finance that?
Right. So, the first thing we always say is look for insurance, and always ask. Another thing that changed my life was getting the Children's Medical Services insurance. We started off on Florida Blue when we first moved here, and moving to CMS just opened up a whole host of other possibilities in terms of reimbursed therapies. So I think insurance is something that parents always struggle with, and just always need to investigate more and more and more as much as you can.
Now, CMS, is that a government,
It's
quasi-government?
Kid Care. So yeah, it's state government. So it's managed by Sunshine Health, but it's you qualify through the state children's program.
Now, is this just for special needs kids, or?
Yeah, CMS is only for, you have to have a verified disability.
And so anyone with a disability that's been diagnosed by a doctor would qualify, or?
No, there's also a financial test. So
is that like you can't make more than this?
Exactly. You can't make more than this.
What is the cap?
It's around, it depends on the size of your family, but it's between 100 to 150,000.
Okay, 100. So that's going to exclude a lot of families.
It's going to exclude, a lot of families. Like, one of the more difficult places to be is in the $250 to $400,000 range.
Yes,
for a lot of reasons. And it's and we're always looking for new alternatives in that. So part of the things we do for our service is we try to give people, we're not just talking about financial planning. We're trying to tell them about all the things we've learned about in the community. Hey, this is who you can go to talk to about therapies. You got me involved with the CARD, Dad's group, and that's been an incredible resource.
It is a great resource.
We always try to inform people about resources like that. And insurance, it's the same thing. I will say it's been a little bit more difficult to find that right effective insurance for
And-
people in the higher
Right, higher bracket.
brackets.
But there's no lower bracket. They can any income level can.
Yep. It
qualify
goes
for
all the way
that.
down. So they have two different levels. They have Medicaid and Kid Care. Medicaid is like below 50,000, and Kid Care is below 150. So
Now, for the parents above the cap, what is available?
That's a good question. You have to look. There are many different insurance plans, but you just have to look at which ones don't cap the number of therapies that you get, because you don't mind giving for therapies, but I think when they say, okay, after 20 therapies, we don't cover anything,
And
that
CMS
goes a little bit.
keeps covering.
They keep covering it.
Great.
Yeah. Now they do not cover equine therapy.
Okay.
So for equine therapy, you have to have a physical therapist certify that your child has failed twice in regular physical therapy,
Okay.
and that they need to extend it to this.
You were to say something, Nelson?
Well, I was going to say a good segue because you're asking about the insurance, and remember before we started, we were speaking about the life insurance side of it, and you were mentioning what is the best type of approach for special need products, and a good way of seeing what I'm trying to show is there are many ways that you can fund special needs programs, but there's only one way that can guarantee you a result at the end of the day. Now, what is that result going to look like? It could look like a legacy. It could look like a disability benefit payment. It could look as a terminal illness. But the idea here is that there are many ways, and a lot of them should be combined in different vehicles. But there's a pyramid of how to attack any financial, whether it's special needs or not. The first base of it is the defensive planning. You got to protect what you've made. You have a living standard today that you can basically insure for. So replace the word life for financial. So instead of thinking about life insurance, think about financial insurance. How can I guarantee that my next generation will not live below the means that I have today? That is insurable. And that's what we seek to understand from the family is what is it that you need to leave behind in order for your kid to be good? What systems, what amount of money? And that's what we really try to get to, a point of certainty where you know that what you put into place will keep something for the future of the family so that they can live a life with dignity. And there's another aspect to it, which is how do you protect yourself from government benefits, losing government benefits? So one of the good things, again, about life insurance is that any money that you put into the cash value of these vehicles doesn't count against government benefits. It doesn't count against government help. Doesn't count against FAFSA if you want to ask for financial aid for your kid. And it also covers...
What was that last item?
FAFSA, which is when you ask for financial aid in the United States.
When you're applying for colleges.
Yeah.
Say it again.
FAFSA is called FASBA.
What does that mean?
It's the institution or the government organization that provides the financial help for students.
For college.
Yeah,
FASBA. So it's like Florida.
Yeah. No, it's not Florida. I think it's federal.
Federal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the idea here is, if you have assets, but you're worried that you may not have those assets in the future, things are getting expensive, right? You can start a program for your kid that won't ever count against him for federal help. That's number one. Number two is, let's say you do have a lot of money and you're scared of losing those government benefits, but also not securing part of that wealth specifically for your kid. Well, with life insurance, you can help secure that, but also plan for the transfer of the assets. If you have a lot of money and you go above the exemption of estate inheritance, you end up paying 40% on any amount above that to the government. So what we can do is we can help you secure those assets into your kid's future versus the government's.
Now, are we talking about a special needs trust or about insurance separate?
It's all combined together.
All combined.
And that's the difficulty of it, is that it's hard to separate them and have somebody who's never heard of any of the three aspects, but it really is a combination of all. And that's what makes special needs planning through life insurance a little bit more superior than other vehicles, because of the fact that you can guarantee the result, you can protect against government benefits, against disability benefits, and you can also have estate planning. Also, while you're living, you're not paying any taxes on the growth because it's tax advantage. So when you're living,
the insurance,
you're getting a benefit, but also when you're not there anymore, has a bigger benefit. So that's where we normally tend to find the best solutions. Not all of them go, because some people don't qualify for life insurance, but there are other ways to do it through normal vehicles. So
yeah, I gotta say, when we met, it was at Key Biscayne.
Yes.
You were doing a presentation, and you assume these are wealthy people for the most part in Key Biscayne. You think that they're so sophisticated when it comes to all this, and yet I found them asking a lot of questions that you realize they don't know either. So this is, I gotta admit, and I've been going over this in my mind for months since we first met, and still it's not clear to me. Again, back to the trust factor, people just they distrust, and so you think that people that are at these higher levels will know all this, and they don't, and it's quite. I'm still a little bit confused, with how this all works out. So I'm just trying to think, how do we present this? Myself, okay, my daughter's 8. If I came to you and let's say I make $150,000, if you threw that number out, what would be how would we start setting my daughter up and my little boy? Because, I want him to be included as well. What would be a plan look like?
before I answer that, just want to say that this is an ever-changing industry.
Of course.
I thought I had everything planned out for my kids until I met Steven. And then Steven showed me a whole different side that I hadn't even touched or seen. And that's why one of the reasons we decided to work together and build a team, because, you know, I'll let him share what he brought, but I knew a lot of the insurance side of it, you know, and I can tell you that this changes every year. So it's very hard for me to give you an answer where I can just, you know, put it in the paper and say, now you have everything you need. You need a conversation to happen every year with the same, every year to see what has changed. That's why part of our business model is we provide, you know, twice or sometimes even 3 times meetings with special needs families, so we understand what has changed, you know, in terms of regulations, in terms of finances, in terms of, you know, the general outlook on their future. And it's an ever-changing model that we just need to keep in contact to really know that we're doing the best we can every year. So.
Steve, you have an additional certification. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So as I started getting in and studying this, I realized that I needed to beef up a little bit of my expertise on it. And there's a certification called the Chartered Special Needs Consultant, and it's, you know, three classes through the American College Financial Services. Mm-hmm. Each one has an exam, but there's no final certification test or anything. But the final course is live online, and it goes so deep into some of these technical subjects. The first 2 go into some of the softer skills. Mm-hmm. Like
what are softer skills?
Something like language, using people first language when discussing disabilities. Okay. Talks about the history of the ADA and all the different regulation that's been passed over the years. So it's interesting because it tells you, you know, how this whole kind of, you know, this is all fairly new in the U.S. I think the ADA was mid-'70s.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. And so it gets into that. Then it gets into how to use people first language. You know, you talk about a child with disability, with autism, not putting the autistic first. And that's all, you know, that's interesting, and it's interesting to use. But then the final course really got into the details about some of the, you know, more technical aspects that I know we've discussed. And it gets it gets complicated.
Okay, well,
Pretty quickly.
back to me and my daughter. I make $150K.
Yep.
She's 8, and I'm going to die when she's 18.
Okay.
What would that plan look like for her?
Okay. So first, we do bread and butter financial planning, because we have to worry about the now as well as the future. So for the now, we would do everything with, look at your cash flow, look at your balance sheet, look at your expenses, and try to figure out, okay, how can we make this as efficient as possible? So you have as much, look at all the insurance policies you have throughout, auto, everything else.
Oh, really? How does auto play into that? 'Cause, you don't sell that.
No, but we just we're looking at cash flow. So really we're just trying to say, is there anything we can do?
Or do without.
And do without, exactly. So make everything more, think about it as efficiency. We try to make your financial life as efficient as possible.
But it always starts with just some very deep emotional questions, like understanding what keeps you up at night. What is it that worries you the most about your daughter's future? What is it that you want to have in place? And then we start debating, what is affordable? What is a long stretch to get there, and figure out the shortest path. But reality is, we don't tell you what to do. You tell us what is important to you, and then we figure out the best way there. So if you were sitting down with us as a prospect today, I would ask you, what's the most important thing that you fear for when you think about your daughter?
I'll tell you, my daughter, she's nonverbal. She's 8. She may become verbal. Yeah. She may not. She doesn't pay enough attention now where I think that she could be employable, but that might change also.
Okay.
So it's a big question mark. 'Cause I can't tell you, Nelson, in 10 years, she'll get a job and work part-time, and I don't know. So then what would you advise me then?
Well, the great thing about where we normally end up in these conversations is that it's a very flexible vehicle. It works for special needs, or it works for neurotypical people. So the main idea, the main difference is the flexibility it has. The coverage on disabilities, the coverage on death that guarantees that legacy, that rate of return that, other financial vehicles will let you, dream of it, but they won't put a contract saying, well, if you don't make it, we'll pay it for you. So that itself is a starting point. I would say make sure you have some term insurance today in place, because term insurance is something that, costs you $50-$60 a month and you get $1 million coverage. That itself is the legacy, temporary legacy.
Mm-hmm.
We try to convert that into a permanent legacy along the way, when you can afford it, when you can contribute to it. But the main idea is the flexibility that this type of planning provides, that gives you that extra mile for kids with special needs. So again, I don't want to talk about product too much, and that's why I'm not dodging the question. It's just that we can't really get into personal planning without understanding more of the background. And I don't want to make the interview about how we do our magic. It's more about help you understand that there is a vehicle that gives you the flexibility that you're looking for. We just have to choose which one.
You were going to say something, Steve?
I'll just say, let me say we really try to understand the prognosis for your daughter, what you see for the future. And one thing's going to happen when she turns. So right now, let's say you were go to apply for Medicaid insurance, SSI, Medicaid.
I could do that when she's 8?
You can apply for it for her, but they look through her assets. They say, what does she own? And then they look through to the parents, and they say, what do the parents own?
Mm-hmm.
And if you own more than $2,000 in assets,
the parents,
then you don't qualify. When she turns 18, they stop looking at the parents, and they start looking just at her.
So she could apply at that point.
And she should apply at that point. And you don't want her to have a bank account with $10,000 in it.
Right.
You don't want her to
But it could be an ABLE account though, right?
Yes, it could be. Absolutely. Okay. ABLE account's a
different animal.
It's an awesome
it's
account.
An awesome vehicle.
Very, very good vehicle to use. And we always recommend that.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say, let's say you think you're going to die when she's 18. You're not going to be here. You have a life insurance policy, and the beneficiary isn't her. The beneficiary is
The special
the
needs
special
trust.
needs trust.
Now, back to the parents, you're saying if they own more than $2,000, how can any adult be worth less than $2,000? I mean, do they own things in a trust, or how does that work?
No, usually it's just there's if people are there are people out there that just rent their houses.
But they own a car.
Don't
Most
have a
cars
car,
are worth
don't have a
$2,000.
car. Maybe they lease a car.
Okay.
And they just don't have any assets. And
Now-
they're living paycheck to paycheck. And those people can't qualify.
But can you financial plan for those people, or
No, what we tend to do is we first of all inform them that if you haven't applied for SSI, you can.
okay?
And we guide them towards community resources
Okay.
that are out there. And there's attorneys that are do pro bono work, and there's a lot of different charities, as you know,
Yes.
in the Miami area that could provide resources for them.
Now, I assume you've also worked probably with some very wealthy clients. Is there a cutoff where they don't use this stuff, or like the health, like life insurance and all that? Is there a point where they don't need it, or does everybody benefit from this?
Everyone benefits from it. One thing my director always tells me is that he knows a guy that sold a disability insurance to Warren Buffett and Bill Gates.
Oh, really?
I don't know if that's true or not, but it's it's a good story anyways, that people that understand financial leverage always want to look at this. And I think that we do, we have one client with a $100 million net worth that had a very sophisticated trust structure set up, but very sophisticated insurance. There's very little we could touch with him. It was more about education, but he did not know the part about maintaining eligibility for his son.
Really?
Yeah.
How old was the son when you educated him on the eligibility requirements?
So he is approaching 18.
And at that point, he still didn't know.
Yeah, he still didn't know. And he didn't, in reality, maybe you're not going to need the government benefits.
No.
But it's about, raising a child with special needs it's expensive. It's expensive. And all but the very, very top of society, the top 0.1%, it's meaningful for. And you just want to maximize your optionality.
I mean, if the money's available and you can make it work legally, I don't see why not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll add a little bit there. There's a crossroad in between those who don't need it because they have a lot of money and they can self-insure, what we call it. But going back to the strategies that we're talking about, because you're tax advantaged, that means that the more you have, the more taxes you pay. The more taxes you pay, the more you save with these strategies. So I hate to say it this way, but it is true. The higher tax bracket is, the more savings and the more this becomes. Doesn't mean that for the lowest tax brackets it doesn't work. It works just as fine, but on the top level, because you save a little bit more, you end up getting a better return, even a better net return because you're saving more in taxes.
Let me ask you a question. With these really wealthy clients, have you had clients who were really good at making money? Let's say that they owned X business, but didn't understand the financial side? Like you probably get people like that.
I would say even the majority of people in the industry working alongside, they have trouble understanding the full spectrum of what this means, because it is a very complicated subject.
Yes.
It's not rocket science, but it is a lot of legal, fiscal, and financial information grouped together. So, I've been working with my dad's financial advisors for 40 years here in Miami, right? They had no clue on the stuff that I do today. And I looked up to them saying, like, these guys know everything. So this, as I said in the beginning, is an ever-changing world. And I would say most of the time that you'll get the full information is from somebody who's going through the same process.
Yes.
It's very hard to, have somebody know all or the majority of the answers when they haven't lived through it.
No skin in the game. Now, a question, without getting specifics, tell me about a client who came to you that made a lot of money, had a lot, but didn't understand, and then you somehow set up a plan for them. So it gives a perspective.
So I have,
Special needs plan.
yeah, I have two. Well, it's one case, but they have two situations there, right? So I have a client who did a lot of money during COVID. He has one newborn that was one when we tried to do the planning, and had a daughter that was about 25, okay, who's also on the spectrum, right? Now, when we did the family planning, I got to do the insurance on all the family, including the one on the spectrum, but not on the newborn that was on the spectrum because they weren't reaching the milestones, right? So they got checked with the doctor, and when they tried to do one of the policies, they realized that they were missing some milestones. So they said, hey, we can only insure you after 2 years when they have reached certain milestones. Now,
What does that mean by milestones?
so whenever you bring your kid to the doctor because you see that something's wrong, they're going to evaluate their milestones to see where they are, right?
Okay.
Both of my kids were born with autism, but I got them insured since day one. So they had insurance before they can get declined.
But at day one, there's no milestone to have met or missed, or is there?
From day one, no. But when you start reaching year 2, then these things start to show up. So I had to wait 2 years for this client to get insurance on their 2-year-old because they already had gone to the doctor and saw that there's something missing there. Versus in my case, for example, that I got them insured from day one. So when they discovered it, they were already insured. So what I'm trying to say is planning early makes a huge difference, especially if you know that somebody in your family has a disability.
Let's talk about the difference. Okay, day one versus a 2-year-old. How much of a difference is there once they turn 18, let's say?
Well, the thing is, I haven't been able to insure the 2-year-old because they need to basically get out of the diagnosis at that point. So now I got her insured some other way because they don't have to be the insured. I can have the father be insured, the sibling be insured, and have that policy in the kid's name, right? Until they get a better diagnosis or get, the insurance world gets more understanding on autism so that they can insure higher levels of risk. But the point is this, everybody's insurable when they're born. Okay. The idea is try to get them into a plan, especially if you know that there could be problems in the future. And I'm a huge, benefactor of that because I did it without knowing. And I've seen how other people who haven't done it on time have gone through a huge struggle to get them insured at the end of the day. So the answer is yes, they can get insured, but we have to go through different ways that are not as impactful as they could be if you did it right from the beginning.
The very first day.
So
what exactly is the advantage of the very first day, like monetarily or?
Well, first of all, in terms of underwriting, you're on the clear. Second of all, you get more time for the funds to be invested. And since they're invested and they're tax-free investments or tax advantage, I should say, those extra 2 years, especially at the end of the road, make a huge difference. Okay, in terms of cash value, in terms of benefits, in terms of peace of mind. Like with me, right, I know the fact that my kids are insured and I'm insured, I could die today and have peace of mind and have a knowing that my kids have the system, have the money, and have the care that they need, whatever happens to their future. Because that's the uncertainty part that kills us. So what we try to provide is certainty for people and for families.
And I'm guessing that having your kid insured at day one, you're very much an outlier. That's not most people. They don't do this.
Yeah, only because I was in the industry and I got to see the importance and I understand it. Because a lot of people are in the industry and they don't fully understand. So these strategies that I'm talking about, not everybody in our industry uses it, and it's sad because it really provides the most advantageous future for your kid.
No, I talk to a lot of autism dads, and special needs dads. If I want to speak to them about these policies, because I'm always thinking with the mission, because money is a big part of being a special needs parent. It's always money, in one way or another. What would I tell them? Is there how much would it cost them? Is there a minimum, max?
Yeah, one thing we try to do first of all is map out how much money will your child need for the future. And
how do you map that out?
Really, it's just
pretty complicated.
It's complicated. We have a planning software
that
does it, but a lot of it comes from the initial few conversations and getting how much therapy are they getting? How long will they need to get that therapy for? Might be forever. So assume need therapy forever. How much what other expenses are you going to have? What are the living expenses going to be? Will the child be working at all? Will he or she eventually get some income? Mm-hmm. Or if not, they'll be getting income from disability.
Okay.
And you put all that together, then you get a number, and say that number is $500,000. Then that gives you an idea of what the initial face value of the target that you're shooting for in the life insurance, even if you have no other savings.
I just got the 2-minute warning. Let's finish on a positive note. Tell me about a success story you've had that once the parents passed away and the kids were adults and that you just set them up great. Let's talk about a success story.
I think I haven't seen one that's gotten to the end, but where we've gotten to is the relief and the peace of mind that we see on people when we complete their plan, because all of a sudden the future's set and all that worry,
fewer question marks
in the background. Yeah. Fewer question marks. And that is something, that you can see it in the people's faces and their demeanor and in how they were acting before, what their body language was, what their stress level was before and after.
Yeah. I gotta say myself personally, as I'm putting together my daughter's plan and my boy's plan, it's a relief. Because, for a while you're in denial. I just pretend it's not happening, but it is happening. We're getting older. They're getting older.
It took me forever to do it.
And as you start doing it, my plan's not done, but I'm starting it. It's a relief.
Yeah,
it is a relief.
And the end goal for us is to guarantee the needs so you can optimize the rest. That's where we're looking at. We want to figure out how much we need to put in place so that person can live off the interest and leave that legacy for his kid, because it's multi-generational planning.
That's great.
And I would love to just read out one thing that I wrote as a call to action that I think was important for us to leave your audience with. And it says, you've already done the hardest part, showing up every day for your child. Your fight for services, for therapies, for understanding. But what about the fight for their future? A trust, a policy, a plan. These aren't just documents. They're love letters to your child's life after you. And just like a seatbelt, you don't wait for the crash. You put it on before. You advocate at school and at home. Now it's time to advocate financially. And when you call us, you're not reaching a salesperson. You're reaching a fellow parent who gets it. We've cried in IEP meetings. We've asked the same late night questions. If you're ever whispered, what happens when I'm gone? Don't just wonder. Take the next step. The most powerful legacy isn't money. It's peace. It's love that outlives you. Let's build that together.
Nelson, that's really nice. Yeah. So if people want to get a hold of you guys, how do they do that?
So Prudential Advisors, each of us has a website under Prudential Advisors. You can do Prudential Stephen Clark, Prudential Nelson Maldonado.
Can they call you directly?
And you can call me directly. Yeah, call me directly.
What's your phone number?
786-674-7718.
And mine's 571-535-8408.
Great. Guys, this has been really good, very educational, inspirational too. I like what you just read now. That's so awesome. Yeah. So let's turn to the camera. This has been the Autism Podcast at Miami Community Newspapers. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.